So hello, everyone. My name is Kim Littlefield. I'm one of the partners at Keystone Partners, and we'd like to welcome you to today's webinar. This is the second in what we hope will be a series of webinars on issues in particular that women face, but everyone faces, really. And the topic today is building resilience and preventing burnout. For those of you that are not familiar with Keystone, we are an organizational consulting firm. And we specialize in career transition, executive coaching, coaching certification as well, and leadership development. And our hope is that the services that we offer will help you attract, engage, and retain your talent, and also help them build the resilience across your workforce so that they'll stay and remain engaged. This topic actually came about, Shmudi was just talking with me earlier as we were logging on, that it came out of the June webinar. And it's been the suggestion of many of the participants, and we thought this is the perfect time to do it. So joining me today is a panel of my two colleagues, Lisa Smith, who's off camera right now, but she's going to be working the chat and the questioning. So feel free to put whatever you want in chat, and she'll be feeding that to us. And then also my dear colleague, Shmudi Patel, who is one of our certified, PCC certified ICF coaches, and Shmudi's expertise is leadership coaching, but also conflict coaching. We also have with us Lisa Abbott, who is the CHRO of Children's Hospital, and Debbie Lewis, who is the CHRO of Loomis Sales and Company. And then joining us shortly should be Tama Donovan, who is the Director of Global Employee Engagement for Wellington Management. So ladies, thank you so much for agreeing to join us again today. Really excited about the topic. What we thought we would do is define resilience and define burnout, just to kind of set the stage of what we're talking about today. So resilience, if you were to look it up in Google or AI, is the ability to absorb change and continue delivering great work. And burnout is a state of mental, physical, and emotional exhaustion caused by prolonged stress, often at work, which can make it difficult to function. So not that we don't experience it at home as well, but we're talking specifically today about how we're experiencing resilience and burnout in the workplace. So some things to know about burnout are that the volume of the work doesn't necessarily cause burnout. And Tam and I were talking about this yesterday. It's our inability to manage it, right? So we're going to dive a little bit deeper into how these ladies do manage it. It's not a weakness. It's just a warning sign. It's also not a badge of honor. It's a signal for change, and we need to figure out how we're going to manage it so it doesn't become overwhelming. It's also a big sign that something's not right. If we're feeling dread, if we're not looking forward to work, and we're not bringing our best self to work, we have to figure out when we're going to pause and actually own that and set boundaries. And I know, Shmudi, you're a big advocate for the boundaries. So healing from burnout takes a lot longer than taking the necessary steps to prevent burnout and build resilience. So that's really our focus today, is how can we all become more resilient if we don't feel we are already, and really keep that burnout and stress at bay. So we did a little bit of research and thought we'd throw out a couple of data points to set the stage of how important this topic is. There was a recent survey of 3,600 plus HR leaders done by a company called Unmind, and nearly 70% of those senior HR leaders reported an increase in burnout at their organization over the past year. That's an incredible statistic. So with those stress levels at the highest level in decades, the organization was really advocating that this is a problem and it needs to be on our agendas for 2025. It's actually the number one reason people are absent from work is burnout. Another interesting stat is nearly 8 in 10 employees experience burnout on the job at least sometimes. Again, 80%. And according to the Lancet Public Health study, women are much more likely to experience burnout, almost twice as much as men, because of the obvious that they're often in the caregiving roles and tackling housework and elderly parents and pets and what have you. And so, combined with the full-time job, how do you do it all? So to get started, let's start with an open-ended question in the chat, which is, how often do you, as a participant in this webinar today, how often do you experience burnout? Let's do a pulse check and see where we are. So just for those of you that might be driving, some of the things that we're seeing pop up are several times a year, some of the time daily, haha. Every couple months, quarterly, too frequently. Yep, that's what we're trying to work on here. Seasonally, that's interesting. I find with the time change, I don't know the rest of you, when it gets darker, it's much, much harder. On a regular basis, every couple months. So it's pretty much the full spectrum is how we experience burnout. Lisa, I thought we'd start with you because you're coming from a healthcare organization. And I know when we did the prep call, you had said, pre-COVID, preventing burnout and building resilience was an issue. So do you want to tell us a little bit about what you've been experiencing over at Children's?
Yeah, thanks very much, Kim, and thanks everyone for joining today. It's a really important topic, and it impacts us all in some similar ways and in some very different ways. For those of you who work in healthcare, you'll know that this was an issue that started to really manifest, at least 10 years ago. The introduction of the electronic medical record, while really fantastic invention, if you will, for patients, right? We no longer have to go to our varying doctor's offices to pick up our films or our records or those kinds of things. It increased the burden on clinical workers quite a lot in terms of the bureaucracy and closing out charts and things of that nature. And that was simply one aspect of the beginning of what I would describe as this epidemic in healthcare. Then, of course, along comes the pandemic, and we don't have enough time in this hour to talk about the impact that has had on clinical caregivers and their family members, really. So I think we see things in healthcare just a little bit differently, maybe than other industries, because we are the industry that's caring for others. We know that our patients and their families aren't seeing us because they're well or because there are good things going on with life. And so, I think we have a higher calling to really work on the overall health and well-being of the people that work in healthcare, so we can continue to extend the care that you expect when you come to an institution for to see a doctor or a nurse, or because there's a problem with yourself or a family member.
So Lisa, can you give us some examples? Because what's so interesting about your organization, it really runs the gamut, right? You have hourly employees, and then you have all the way up to the C-suite and everywhere in between, and you have thousands of employees. So what are some of the things that you've had to do as an organization?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly not a one-size-fits-all strategy, right? The things that impact our frontline workers are very different and often more up close and personal than folks that sit in a corporate office, if you will. So we're really sensitive about trying to encourage basic things like taking time off. We, like many of you, I'm sure, have programs where we let people sell back their unused vacation and so forth. And I'm not a fan, right? I'm not a fan. I actually want people to take their paid time off. We're working hard on reducing the bureaucracy of being a physician. Things like I mentioned, the electronic medical record, but also the mandatory training. There are so many things that we require our caregivers to do by way of mandatory training. And we're really studying and saying, what are the things that are mandated by law, right? What are the things that are required in order for us to stay licensed? And how do we just focus on the minimum number of those sorts of things? Everybody wants their particular thing to be the most important learning that our population has, but not everything rises to the level of a mandate. And those things can be really impactful when we say, okay, instead of having 30 mandated learnings, you have 4. Or you can test out if you know the content. There are things we have to do annually. If you know the content, you can test out, and that accounts for credit. So there's a variety of different things, and again, recognizing that a person who's cleaning a room has very different but very important needs, just like a person who is coding and billing or providing bedside care.
Thanks, Lisa. Debbie, I know you're a big advocate for it. Sort of starts from the top down, right, with the CEO. So can you talk a little bit more about some of the things that Loomis has done and how your CEO's championed that along with you as a CHRO?
Sure. So we're at Loomis Sales is an asset management company, so very different from what Lisa described. And I would say it was during COVID where a lot of the burnout issues really rose to our attention. And that was because we were all fully remote. The day started when you woke up and it ended when you went to bed. There were no delineations between the work day and the home day. And that caused a lot of stress and burnout for people over the course of those couple of years. Now we still have a fully remote group of people, but we also have a hybrid group. So we do try to think about the two different populations and the different needs that people have. But our CEO has encouraged and supported our initiatives in HR to offer training and workshops and resources to employees. We offer weekly, I think 1 or 2 weekly meditation mindfulness sessions that any employee can participate in. We encourage employees to reach out to our EAP to get more individual support that they might need. And we've also seen an uptick in leaves. So making sure that employees know if you need to take time off, you can take time off. And working with them and their managers to make that as feasible as possible for those who need it.
Debbie, I'm curious, did you do an employee engagement survey where you got the feedback, or just was it coming to you from the managers or the employees themselves? As far as
it was coming all the way around. It was definitely a topic of discussion for everyone, and I felt it myself. So it was real life.
Thank you. Shruti, I know part of what Debbie's talking about is the boundaries, right? Is that were blurred when COVID hit and we were all working from home. And you work with senior leaders who then have to advise or counsel or coach their direct reports and their business units. So I'd love to hear what you have to say about the boundary setting.
Yes, thank you so much, Kim. And this is a great topic and a very timely topic, particularly for this time of the year. So whenever I hear burnout or I hear symptoms of burnout, one of the first things that I want to talk to a client about are boundaries. And so those boundaries are both how are we setting those boundaries at home and how are we setting them at work. We often are doing them in one, but not the other, and sometimes we're not doing them at all. So the first thing to think about is where can I set those boundaries, both personally, at home and at work? And one of the things that I like for people to think about when we're thinking about work is how many channels are you available on? So we have become so used to having Zoom and having Teams and having email and having text message and everything going at the same time. And literally every time something is pinging or asking for your attention, it's like an alert response that our body has to provide to that, to whatever it is that is asking for our attention. So that's one example. But as I said, first thing to think about are where are those boundaries that you are able to set? And that's something that's often difficult for clients to immediately identify. The second point that I would also make is that to think about self-care. So often, and in particular, when I talk to women, often there is a conflation between selfishness and self-care. So women often think that putting ourselves first in some way is selfish, but that's really different to what self-care is and about how is it that we're taking care of ourselves. So let me stop there for a second.
I love that distinction, the self-care, right? I'm nodding my head because I think every female friend that I have is saying that. We actually have a question in the chat from Joshua that I'd love to throw out to each of you. As a male, what are some of the best practices in addressing stress and burnout with female employees? Thank you, Joshua, for asking that. Who would like to tackle that one?
I'm happy to go first. I'm sure everybody has something to contribute. I think it's a great question. as an employer who has 74% of our workforce as females, I think our folks would be glad that you asked. I think just an appreciation that oftentimes the lion's share of lots of things falls to women, not always, but often. Things like caring for family, as Kim noted, in her remarks, caring for family, caring for children, attending to the needs in the home, and being really cognizant of what kinds of benefits you can offer that are either family friendly or female friendly. Things like easy access to childcare, lactation space for new moms, particular attention to things that may address and help ameliorate the burden on families that often women bear the lion's share of. So thank you, Josh, for asking the question. And I know my colleagues will have other suggestions to add.
So thank you, Tiama. I know you just logged on, so I want to be able to ask the question again so you can hear it. And then Shmudi, I'd love to hear your perspective. So Tiama, the question was from Joshua: as a male, what are some of the best practices in addressing stress and burnout with female employees? So I'll let you process that. Shmudi, you were going to make a comment.
Yes, I was just going to support what was just said, and that is that we also need to remember that we are in the workplace. We have a generation which is not only supporting childcare, but also supporting elderly care. And so sometimes it's childcare and elderly care, or sometimes it's elderly care. And that's very different. Those two types of cares are very different that we have to engage in as well. So that's just something that I wanted to just bring to attention to.
Yeah, Lisa, you probably see a lot of that in your, just because you're a healthcare organization, you're caring for people, and many of whom are elderly. So any comments on that sandwich generation?
Yeah, I think it just compounds the, sort of the life challenges, right? And, we see it often when people are not so much in the children's space. When I was in the adult space, people who are caring for an elderly parent, bringing their parent to the doctor and their kid is in tow, right? Because that's how they have to navigate. And so there are certainly those opportunities to be sure to acknowledge that in a certain age range in particular, there are those dual challenges of, how to navigate the children and how to navigate the needs of the parents.
Thank you. Tama, I know you had a little bit of tech issues, so we're so glad you're on. Do you have any thoughts on the question from Joshua about addressing stress and burnout with female employees if you're a male?
So I apologize if I'm saying anything that was already said, and I apologize for the technical issues I had. But I guess my main point would be to just not make any assumptions about what someone else is experiencing. I do think there's a lot of data and studies that show that men and women do actually tend to experience burnout in different ways. And just being mindful that that how someone else is, or how your colleagues, regardless of gender identity, are experiencing it might not actually be the same way that you do.
Yeah, very, very important point. Debbie, what are your thoughts on this question?
Or to go off on what Tama just said, I think just checking in with people and finding out how they're doing, not making the assumptions, and seeing what they might need or what resources you might know about that they don't know about. There's so much that gets communicated. I know from HR, we send out a lot of information. We think everyone knows and reads it all, but they don't. So there may be some ways that you've helped yourself that you could share with someone else, but not making the assumptions, I think, is a really good point.
All really good points. Another great comment in the chat is, and you brought it up, Debbie, is working from home. That setting of boundaries can be really tricky. I know for myself, I do a lot of global work. And so sometimes I haven't even gotten out of bed and I grab my phone. And before I know it, like 45 minutes has gone by and I've been responding to emails and I haven't even gotten out of bed. And that's my own fault, right? I'm allowing myself to be sucked in before I start my day. So can you tell us a little bit more about what you've done to set your own boundaries? I'd love to hear from each of you on this. Debbie?
Sure. I do the same thing. I grab my
So I'm not
check
crazy.
my emails. because we're global, so there may be someone in a different country, and I want to provide good service to them. That gives me peace of mind. So maybe it does add stress to people's day, but for me, I'm like, okay, I've taken care of what needs to be taken care of immediately. Then my routine is I go into the New York Times games for probably 20 minutes. I kind of, erase my what's going on for the day, and then I get started. So it's just little routines and tricks, I think, for how you can start your day and get your mind going.
Love it. Tamo, how about you? Any tips on how you manage the boundary part from working from home?
So I guess that I would say that, sometimes managing, and we're talking about burnout, which is you don't experience, a long day doesn't necessarily give you burnout, 2 hours in a situation that totally empties your gas tank. That's what gives you these feelings that we refer to, I think, as burnout. And so any given time could be any given day could be better or worse for me in managing my own energy to be from home or to be in the office. So there's no right answer for me. Sometimes when I'm at home, I feel very isolated, and it's better for me to be around my colleagues and feel that support. And sometimes it's better for me to be working, remotely, so that I can set those boundaries and really plan my day, so that I'm maybe starting really early or taking a break midday, or, structuring my day the way that works best for me. It really is a matter of self-awareness in terms of what are the things that sap your energy right out of you, and what are the things in any given situation you can do. So sometimes working from home is great, and sometimes it's not, for me anyway.
Mm-hmm. Great comments. Shruti, what would you add about the boundary part? Oh, you're on mute, Shruti. Shruti has a cold. She's a trooper. She's on here trying to keep herself upright. So thank you, Shruti.
Of course. I was just going to add to what Tama just said, and I love that, just the awareness, building the awareness. But I would also say that have something to go to. So if you know that you're going to have a difficult meeting, set something up. But sometimes we don't have something that we can set up. So is there something that you can go to? Let me give you an example. For me, it's actually always about photographs and poetry. They're two things I absolutely love. So I will make sure that, first of all, I read a poem before I go to bed every night anyway. But what I do is, if I know that if I've been through a difficult situation, somebody's pulled me into something and I need to recenter myself, I will read a poem. I'll just read a poem and I will reset myself. Or I will look at some of the photographs I've taken, or I will go to a web page, or I will look at the books of photography that I may have. Just anything like that. So think about what's accessible for you that can just take you out of that present moment where there's been this fire and angst that's been going on, and just bring you back to center.
Yeah, that's a really I love even the word poem is calming. Never mind reading the poem. So that's a great tip. We're going to add that to our list. Lisa, what are your thoughts on that, setting boundaries?
Yeah, I think a couple things. One is you have to do what works for you, and only you know what that is. And it needs to work for you, not the people around you necessarily. I know that's hard, especially when we're talking about our commitment to family and others. But really important to know what works for you. I would say on a personal level, I'm very wedded to my calendar, and I schedule everything, including my personal time. In other words, I always block, an hour or more in the morning, because I'm very much a morning person, and that's when I exercise. And that's time that, that I make sure gets earmarked for that purpose exclusively. The days get away from us. It's really easy for that to happen. So I want to be sure that my day starts with something that's about my fulfillment, and it allows me to give more to others. But I'm a real fan of making sure that we block time on our calendars to do the things that are going to be important to us, not just meetings and things of that nature, but whatever that something is for you, make sure your calendar accounts for it. It's easy to have the time consumed by other things if we don't just sort of own our own responsibility to block that time.
Thank you. There's a follow-up question from Joshua. It's a great one. This is, the question about how can men be respectful of women who are suffering from burnout. What are some best practices to make it be perceived as genuine? I completely agree with the panel. It tends to be difficult to break through that perception that is sometimes unwarranted. So, and I want to also make a comment that was in chat that men also take care of children. And I think especially the millennials and the Gen Zs that are starting to have children are, light years above other generations, and, owning that and being proud of it, and vocalizing that they're taking the time to take care of their children, their dog, their parents, whoever it is. I want to make sure we did acknowledge that. But are there any best practices to make sure it comes across as genuine?
I guess my question is, what is it that's making it feel that it's not genuine? So, because I would think that if these practices are being put forward in good faith, that they would be accepted in good faith. So my question is, what is happening that it's not being perceived that way? And then secondly, Kim, on the point that you just made, I think we have to also acknowledge that mental health for men is it's a secret disease in many ways. So we know this from the statistics, from really the horrifying statistics of the amount of men who do take their lives. So I'm really glad that you brought up that point, that this issue around burnout and resilience and all of that is very much relevant to men too.
Yeah. Thank you for reiterating that. And there is another great comment in chat about how if you mean it to be genuine to the person that you're communicating with, it should come across as genuine. So assume best intentions, right? There's another question on what are your tips for managing grief and burnout during the holidays, especially being a mom, a woman who's relied upon for family obligations and gatherings and organizing events and the gifts and all that stuff. Any thoughts on managing that through this particular time of year?
I would start by saying, we're sorry for your loss. That makes this particularly difficult, I'm sure. Maybe it's a good year to assign some of these responsibilities to others. It's a unique year for you, and it could be an opportunity to say, hey, family member, we're gonna have the holiday at your house, or we're gonna have you contribute in a potluck style. I just don't have it in me this year. And, I don't want to disappoint, but I want this to be special and different, and let's celebrate mom in this different way, and try to rely on others. That's, I think that you're really entitled to do that, and, create a special occasion to the extent you can by inviting others to do something that they may not have done in years past because of your family traditions and so forth.
I love that, Lisa. I would also add not to make assumptions, because others in your family and your friend group could be going through something similar. We had a change in our Thanksgiving plans where my mother always makes the dinner and I'm the support crew, right? But her cousin called her the night before and said, my whole family can't make it because there's a snowstorm in New Hampshire. Would you mind if I brought all the fixins over? Now, we hadn't started cooking yet, so we welcomed it and we merged the two families and we all played games for the rest of the afternoon because we had more people to clean up. And so I think it's just not assuming that it has to be that same way all the time. What other thoughts do you have, Debbie, Tam, or Shmoody, to add to this question?
Oh, go ahead, Shmoody.
Sorry, I was just going to say one other thing that I would just say that is steal. And when I say steal, I mean steal time for yourself. So that's a really important piece of self-care. So if you're running around to the grocery store, can you steal 10 minutes to just jump into a coffee shop and just have a coffee by yourself? Or can you just steal 10 minutes and just sit in the car and do nothing? Just steal that time, because I think those moments to yourself are just moments where you can then gather yourself and then move yourself forward as well.
Love
Sorry,
it.
go ahead.
Debbie, go ahead.
Sure. I think we all need to learn to say no. I know that was something I didn't do very well, but I've practiced it and it's working. It's working very, very well. So not feeling obligated to do everything you've always done the way you've always done it, and being more mindful and appreciative of your own time and your own mental health, and saying no when you need to.
Really good point. I have a sticky on my whiteboard, learn to say no. Because, when you're used to saying yes all the time, it's not always easy. Tama, were you going to make a comment about this?
I have a comment, Kim, if I could just add one. Sometimes it's not saying no, it's saying not right now, which makes no feel a little bit more palatable, right? Now's just not, thank you for asking, now's not the right time for me. And I agree with you, Debbie, as somebody who struggles with the same thing, I'm starting to get better at saying, call me in 6 months, now is not the right time. And that feels better to me.
Yes, it's more palatable. We have another question from Lisa in the chat here from one of the participants. I tend to block time in my calendar midday to take a walk and recharge mentally. I find lately I'm dismissing those self meetings because I'm in a rhythm. I don't want to interrupt. Other than rescheduling, do you have any recommendations that help you hold yourself accountable to your scheduled personal time?
Yes.
Few things. I'm going to jump in, Shmuti, and then turn it over to you. One is get a buddy and have a working meeting when you're walking. I do walking meetings all the time. And so if you can figure out a way to navigate the calendar such that you can kind of continue the energy flow around the thing that you're working on, but you're doing it with somebody and you're walking and talking, might not be completely personal time, but you're actually up and moving and you're still kind of keeping that great thought flow going. Sorry, Shmuti.
Great thoughts, Lisa. Go ahead, Shmuti.
Sorry, no, the other thing I was just going to say is that we often go into an all or nothing mentality. So if we've scheduled 30 minutes, then we're going to do 30 minutes or nothing at all. Go for 10 minutes, go for 15 minutes. If it's not a walk, doesn't matter. Sit and see if you can meditate for 10 minutes or sit and read a poem, do whatever it is, but just take that time, steal time.
Love that, steal time. Debbie or Tama, do you have any comments on this?
So I guess my only comment, I'm like little Miss Contrarian today, is if it's giving you energy to continue doing that work and that is really exciting for you in the moment, I guess let yourself off the hook. Maybe you're not going to go for a walk that day. It really is about what's happening in your body and in your mind. And you're the best person to know what you need at any given time. So maybe be kind to yourself both ways.
I love it. Tam, I was going to ask you this in the beginning, so I want to go back to it. When I asked you to be on the panel and told you the topic, you're like, I don't, experience burnout. So I don't think I'm the right person to be on the panel. Like, that's why we want you. So I know we've had some conversations about this. It's a little bit of how you label it or really how you look at it. So can you talk a little bit more about that? I know many of you on this panel feel the same way. So I'd love to start with you.
So I've obviously thought about this a lot, and I want to be really clear that I'm not saying burnout doesn't exist. I'm particularly looking at the sort of Lisa, from a healthcare field perspective, it 100% exists. I think I'm more looking at it from a professional services perspective. And, the way that I look at it is I'm not sure that putting that label on myself serves me. If my goal is to live an excellent life and be happy, I have found this, sort of putting myself in that you're now in the burnout bucket. Takes away some of my power, because in fact, my burnout is how you're experiencing a situation, and I have the power to make changes to how I'm addressing any given situation and try to anticipate. And if I didn't anticipate correctly and I start to feel, wow, I have no gas left in my tank, I can do something different. So I always have the power, and burnout feels like a conclusion, like it's done, you're a burned out husk, that's it. Whereas I don't like to use that term, because I do feel like I can always make a little bit of a shift. If I'm having a moment at work where I'm my thing, the thing that tends to burn me out is I get decision fatigue. If I've got thousands of decisions to make and everything feels really important, I try to go on a decision hiatus at home. I say, I'm not making these choices right now. I need some time off from decisions, and that helps to balance. There are always things that we can do. And I just think, that term burnout, it takes away your power. It puts it's hard to look at burnout in anything but a negative way. So it's hard to both be burnt out and also be recognizing I am leveling up right now. This is really hard, but when I get through this, I'm going to be better at what I do. So that helps to give me a little more gas in my tank to think about things that way. And then the last thing, and I think there have been some questions about this, is when you just say I'm burnt out, no one knows how to help you. And everybody experiences burnout for different reasons in different ways. So using your words to not to sound like a mom, but to say, I'm feeling unappreciated, or I am not able to sleep because of XYZ that's happening at work, or I feel really alone right now, or unprepared or overwhelmed. And that enables people to help you, as opposed to just saying I'm burnt out, which it's hard to have a conversation about that. So it's really just about the label.
Yeah, and I like the concept of using your words. It's explaining to people how they can assist you. You also tapped on to what Lisa was saying, which is I'm not going to make any decisions, but you said right now, right? And that, just hearing it again, sounds a lot easier. It sounds a lot more palatable. Debbie, were you going to make a comment about this?
Yeah, I agree with everything that Tama said, and how I give myself a pep talk. You've gotten through this before. You will get through this. It is temporary. Everything is temporary, but you need to remind yourself of that. So the good times are temporary too. I don't like to be reminded of that, but the more stressful times, just take a breath and get through it, and give yourself pep talks along the way. And I think being able to identify more clearly as to what is it, why am I feeling the way that I'm feeling, and how can I address that, target that particular issue, instead of trying to think of it too broadly.
Yeah, 100%. I have a sign that says you got this. And whenever I hesitate, get anxiety about maybe this panel, for example, I say to myself, think about how fabulous you're going to feel once it's complete. You're going to learn so much. You're going to have such a great experience. And so sometimes it's just shifting. Tam, I think that's what you're saying, is shifting how you look at it, right? We've got another great question here from Rachel. So I got to scroll up a little bit here to get to
Kim,
the
can
top.
I just make a quick comment if that's okay? I think there's a really important point being made over here, and that is the word around the word burnout. And I think as we use this very easily, in passing, we use it to mean different things. And so it's important to distinguish that when you are experiencing burnout, is it the emotion of burnout, or are you in a state of burnout? And I think they're two very different things. So if it's an emotion, if you're feeling the burnout, if it's an emotion, then one thing to remember, and there's a lot of research done around this, is that emotions come in waves. And so we can ride that wave. We can say, you got this, just move through it. We can do that. If it's a state, that's different. So a state is when you're consistently experiencing these feelings without that relief, or that relief is very minimal. And so if you're experiencing that state, you've got to look at a very different set of remedies versus if it's the emotion that you're experiencing. So I really appreciate that difference was brought out for us.
Oh, I like that. I like that distinction. Any comments on that?
I think that it's certainly well said that, there, and somebody said it a little bit ago, which is, a bad day in and of itself is just that, it's a bad day. And I too, Debbie, am a believer in the laws of impermanence, right? This too shall pass. But when we're talking about perpetual feelings of unease and sadness and inability to cope and find comfort and solace, then we're talking about needing something different, perhaps EAP, perhaps medical intervention. There could be something physically happening that's causing the feelings that you're having. Everybody processes this kind of stress and pressure and those sorts of things differently. And so you, and you have to listen to you. And if it's something that's not going away, then you need to pay attention to that, and you need to figure out what's the right recourse, what's the right care, so that you can get the appropriate intervention if one is necessary at the right time. But, lots of times we have bad days. Sometimes they're strung together. It's this notion that it doesn't stop and you're starting to feel worse and worse and worse. And that's when, you need to think about getting some help. And it's really okay to raise your hand and say, I need help. And sometimes it's really helpful for those around you if you can say, this is to Tama's point, I need you to help me by doing this. But not everybody knows what they need. And so we have to sort of, appreciate that as well. They know they need something. They're just not quite clear on what it is.
Thank you. And what I would add is it takes a lot of strength. I tell my children this, to admit when you need help or assistance. That is strength. So it's not an embarrassment. There's a couple questions I want to get. What do you need to do when you just want to quit? How do you back off that feeling? What if you don't want to admit it to others that you want to quit? Any thoughts on that? Debbie, Tama?
Can you repeat that, Kim? I was having trouble. You were breaking up.
Sure.
I don't know if it was just me.
What do you need to do when you just want to quit? How do you back off of that feeling? What if you don't want to admit to others that you want to quit, whatever the task is?
Is it quitting a task or quitting your job? Would you, because I think there are two different answers to that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I interpreted it as quitting a task, like I can't do this
Okay.
anymore, but perhaps it was quitting a job.
Let's
Eva,
take
you
it
look
as
like
quitting a task.
because I don't know if you'd want to
And
put that in the chat.
I think
so
that
what would you say,
that's
Tama?
the moment to take that walk. That's the moment to
Yeah.
take that break, to meditate for 2 minutes, to meditate for 10 minutes, to have a conversation, to remind yourself why that task is important. I do think that, if it really helps, and again, we're talking about burnout, we're talking about that sort of, I don't have anything left for this. And I do think that taking a moment to remind yourself why it's important, taking a break, taking the walk can really help you get back to the task. Because if the answer is it's not important and you can't find anybody to tell you that it's important, that's a great thing to know as well. That could be one less
So
thing
we
on your
think a
plate.
clarification, Tama, it is on quitting your job, which we may have all been
okay.
there at some point in our careers. So what would you ladies say if you're at a point where you're ready to quit your job? Any advice on that? You don't want to necessarily admit it to your colleagues, but you may be at that space mentally where you've had it. Any thoughts? Debbie?
I would say make sure you've really thought about, you're not doing it in a state of, that you'll regret it. I think that's super important. And if there are trusted, maybe not colleagues in your company, but someone outside your company that you can talk through it with, or a professional, like Lisa had suggested, if it's really something you're struggling with. But try not to do something in the moment that when you're not in the best frame of mind to make a life decision like that.
Really good advice. Lisa, Shmudi, Tama, what would you add?
I mean, I guess I think sometimes it really helps you to not feel stuck if you look at what's out there. Read through some job descriptions. Does that sound like the grass? The grass is almost never actually greener, I will say. And make sure you understand what are my options and then choose. And it's amazing what a difference it makes once you choose. If you choose to stay, you're going to have a different mindset. And this is all about mindset. And if you choose that, wow, it really does feel in every way that it would be better to be somewhere else, you have the power to change your own circumstances. I will say it's good to have lots of talks before you make that decision. And that might be one where calling, the EAP counselor that is available to you might really help you as well.
I want to get to Shmudi because I know you'll have some comments on this, but given what Keystone does as far as career transition work, I get a lot of people who call me about this, like, I can't stand it here anymore. I need to leave. And my first question is, why? And what have you done to explore what's outside of your role in your organization? Can you ask for different projects that would add some creativity or new challenges for you? Or have you interviewed outside and seen what else is out there? To your point, Tama, it's not always greener, right? And sometimes just interviewing and feeling wanted by someone else, another organization, can make you feel like, okay, it's my choice to stay, and that's empowerment, right? Shruti, you as a coach, I'm sure you've experienced this with your senior leaders, right?
Yeah, so I agree with everything that's said, and I would also agree that there is agency. We always have agency, but I just want to address a situation where sometimes in some ways, we don't have a choice. So whether they're financial reasons or whatever those reasons are, we don't have a choice, and we need to pull through for the next however many months or whatever it is. And in those situations, I always say two things. First of all, if it is a highly stressful environment and you are already thinking that you no longer want to be here, it's important to remember that your state of mind is of a survivor mindset. So just to remember that when you are in a survivor mindset, that means that you are putting an enormous amount of stress on yourself as well. So if you're doing that, you have to balance it out with self-care. So recognizing this is the situation that I'm going into when I'm going to work every day. So how am I going to balance it out with self-care? That's the first thing. The second thing that I always say is that have something to look forward to every single day. So whatever it is, just have something to look forward to, because that's going to get you through the day. And it can't just be something generic like I'm going to get to spend time with my family. No, be really specific. I'm going to read this poem, or I'm going to go for a swim. That's my thing. Whatever it is, but just have something very clear that you have got to look forward to at the end of each day. So that's just where you feel as if there's really no option, but you need to stay through the job for the time being.
Thanks, Shruti. Anything else you would add? If you're thinking about quitting? Yeah, I think there's some really good advice. We've got another question from Rachel, which is all of this advice is great. A lot of us are not in positions that allow us the autonomy over our time and tasks that we have to take on, and then couple that with work and in-office flexibility. What are some effective ways you've seen employees who are in less autonomous positions draw boundaries and manage burnout? So if you're not, a senior leader, what advice would you have? Debbie?
I would say, and I have people coming into my office asking about this, but keeping the lines of communication open with your supervisor. And I know people have different rapports with their supervisor, but as establishing a good rapport, I think is helpful, so that you can speak honestly when you might be overwhelmed and need a break. Also having suggestions on how you might make adjustments. Like, did you decide, to Tama's point, that task is not, I can't figure out the why I'm doing this. Either help me understand, or maybe it's not something I need to keep doing. So having those conversations with people who can change your situation would be helpful.
Thanks, Debbie. Lisa?
Yeah, I think I would add to that. I think that open dialogue is really important, and leading not necessarily with this is too much work, but more, I really want to do a good job. Can you help me prioritize the things that are most meaningful to you so that I can focus on those first? It's really sort of taking some ownership over the conversation and aligning with your supervisor on what their priorities are, so that if there are only so many hours in the day, you're all agreed that you're going to focus on A, B, and C, not D, E, and F.
It's a good point. I've actually learned to do that myself. When you have so many initiatives, I actually will say, okay, who else do you need to help you accomplish this goal? Who can you get something to right now so they can be working on it so that you can do what only you can do? So, sort of juggling who's needed in that process, and then taking a step back and saying, okay, I've got this. I can do this. Debbie, were you going to make another comment? You said you had people in your office all day. Thank you. I just want to get back to the tips. So Shruti, you've had some great tips, read a poem. Lisa, I love the walk with a friend. What other things do you personally embrace as the senior HR leader? What do you do? We're going to put all these in a tips list that we'll share with the group, but I'd love to hear more of what you do personally. Lisa?
What's that?
Go ahead, Lisa.
Yeah, so I would say I try to do a lot of these things that we've talked about. Certainly don't always get it right, but the one thing that I come back to when I'm feeling particularly stressed and overwhelmed myself is this too shall pass, right? The world will continue to spin on its axis, and tomorrow's a new day. And I just take a deep breath and sort of process. I allow myself to feel whatever I'm feeling, and then just sort of my management of my work often requires me to say, it's this big. Okay, how do I make it this big? And really just break it off into really manageable pieces. And I'm of the mind, make the bed in the morning, because it might be the only really productive thing you get done all day. So I try to look at my work that way. In addition to some of these other things, the scheduling and the exercise and so forth, it's what are my top priorities? If I only get one thing done today, what's it going to be? And recognize the world is going to continue to spin on its axis if I don't get the rest of those things done.
Love that. I love that, taking it from so big to making it like a bite-sized piece. That's wonderful tip. Tama, what other tips would you have? When I had lunch with you, I think it was before COVID, but I remember you and your son were doing meditation. By the way, I did adopt that. Any other tips that you have?
Probably kept it up longer than we did.
Don't count.
And I guess that's what I would say is keep trying new things until you find something that works for you, and you might be the only person that it works for. As I try to go for runs. That's my release. Find ways to let the stress get out, whether that's venting to someone you trust, going for a run, doing something like that, meditating. Find ways to help yourself to manage it, and find ways to not feel that you're a victim to the circumstances. Have those conversations about what's a priority. Ask people what they're doing with your work. Could you help me understand how this gets used, in case you could do it in a different way that would be maybe more engaging for you, or easier or more efficient. Really having those conversations and framing it in a way that serves you.
Thank you. Debbie, how about you?
Probably about 25 years ago or so, I took many of those personality type quizzes or tests. And it came back, does not deal well with unexpected change, which answered so many questions for me. And just knowing that I don't deal well with unexpected change helps me deal with it better. So I think knowing yourself and knowing what is going to cause you stress, but then having the confidence that you've gotten through it before, you'll get through it again. I'm very much the glass is half empty person. So it's maybe easier for me than some others to do that. But just knowing that about myself has helped me deal so much better with because every day something changes.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I have a former boss, Elaine, who hired me at Keystone, and I think I was 30 something when I started at Keystone, and she said, Kim, things aren't always going to go your way. And it sounded so flip at the time, but I think I've embraced it's not always going to go my way, but it will go okay. And you adjust and you flex, and that's what's so wonderful about getting older too, is that you learn. You start to have a reservoir, a bank account of things that you've accomplished, and you've gotten through it. And Lisa, you've taken those bite-sized pieces and you've tackled a huge project. So you have a history, you have a reservoir. So thank you. Any other thoughts, Shruti, from you? You've had some. I love the steal time. That one's a hit. Love it.
Yeah, so I would say the one thing for me that has helped me a lot is that I've had a mindfulness practice for, I think, about 15 years, something like that. And it is my go-to every single day. And people often think that having a mindfulness practice means that you have to sit cross-legged for 3 hours a day. You really don't. Even if it's just 5 minutes that you're going to take for yourself to just center yourself. And there are so many apps out there. There are so many YouTube clips on breathing, on all of those things, that it's just transformational in terms of how it is that you can deal with the ups and downs of life. So that would be my tip in terms of building resilience, that just having a mindfulness practice, it's something that you have to build consistently. That's the most important thing about a mindfulness practice. It's to be consistent every day, whether you're going to do it for 2 minutes, 5 minutes, or 30 minutes, just do it every day, even if it is for 2 minutes and the next day is 30 minutes. So that would be my tip.
Shruti, you had an app that you mentioned to us in the prep. Can you give us the name of that?
Yes, that app is called How You Feel, and I think that's what it's called. I'll have to just look it up in a moment to make sure that that is what it's called. But I think it's called How You Feel. It's a multicolored heart emoji, which is if you look for it, it'll be right there. The reason why I really like this app is because it programs. You can program it for you to check in, whether it's 3 times, twice a day, doesn't matter. But it asks you how you feel. And what it gives you is data on your emotions. So it gives you data on how it is that you're feeling at random times of the day, if you select it that way. And once you have data builds awareness. Then you can start to think about what can you do differently, or how is it that you may want to include a new practice, as an example. So I really love that app. And if you are a client of mine at the moment at KP, please know that I am probably going to force you to use this app so that we are using it, and you will have a new lexicon of emotions as well.
Wonderful. Ladies, I'm looking at the time, so I'm just going to do round robin. I'd love to hear one line. How can you be more resilient in 2025 and push the burnout at bay? Who would like to start?
I'm happy to go first and just say
Tracy.
steal time. Steal
Mhm.
time.
Steal time. I like that one. That's great. And easy to do, right? Because the time could be a small amount of time.
Yes.
Debbie.
Or I would say self-care, huge, and breathe. That to me gives you the moment that you need to recenter.
Love it. Breathe. And that truly, if you take a deep breath, it just all, everything starts to melt away. Tama?
I would say try to force yourself to take the long-term view. What's happening today is not going to be what happens for your career, but it's going to get you farther in your career.
Love it. Lisa?
Be willing to try new things. If what you're doing today isn't working, try something different tomorrow.
Love it. And I would say work out in whatever form that is. My daughter will say to me, Mom, you didn't work out today, did you? I'm like, no. She's like, I can tell. So whatever that is that makes you happy, whether it's a walk or a run, that would be my tip. So thank you so much, all of you, for taking and donating your time to this panel. We really appreciate it. We're hoping to make this a series. As a follow-up, we're all going to send out the recording of this session. So if you have members of your team that you would like to have listen to this, you'll be receiving that. Also, we're going to send 20 tips to make you more resilient and prevent burnout, as well as an ebook on resilience and preventing burnout by equipping your people with leadership skills. So thank you everyone for attending today. We're wishing you a very happy holiday season, as well as a wonderful 2025. Thank you so much.